Good morning, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Am I the right time? Yeah, pretty close. I don't know if it's the right time, but I don't know if I'm in the right place. Okay. All right. Actually, you're probably wondering if you're in the right place, Hey, no class in the fellowship hall today. Let's go there, Let's begin with prayer, and then we'll jump into what we're going to talk about this morning. So let's pray. God, we just want to recognize your presence with us, ask you to make us aware of your presence with us. Give us a sense of calling, that the fact that we are Christ followers is not just a status, but that it is a calling, that it is something that we are to do, not just something that we are to be. Thank you for your love for us. Be with us right now. It's through Christ we pray. Amen. All right, so we are talking in this new class. I say new in the sense of, there are two different words for new in the Greek. One was just new as in came along later than whatever came before it. The other is kind of new and improved. I don't know which this one is yet, but, it's new either way you go. But we're going to talk about Christ at the center of his church, and there are three ideas that I want to introduce today. Doesn't that just sound like a preacher? If I only had a poem at the end, 3 points and then a poem. But got three ideas that I want to introduce to us today so that we'll be prepared to move forward with this. First idea is that Jesus is just different. Jesus is just different. I think that's one of the things that caught the attention of his contemporaries. He's different. So here's what I'd like for you to do. With a neighbor, yes, there will be some interaction here. With a neighbor, what are some of the ways that the Gospels display Jesus' uniqueness, his difference during his ministry? Now, I'm not talking about, the birth narratives. Obviously, that's different. Not talking about the resurrection, so kind of putting those two bookends out there. Not the birth narratives, not the resurrection, but as you think about Jesus as an adult in the days of his ministry, what about him was different in his teachings, in his interaction with people? What are some of the ways the Gospels display Jesus' uniqueness during his ministry? I'm going to give you about 60 seconds with a conversation partner to talk about that, and we'll see what we can come up with. You can start anytime you want, as long as it's now. About 15 seconds. All right, so whether you're done or not, you're done, okay? And of course, I guess you can continue to talk to your neighbor if you want, but, I'm going to call you out. Anyway, what are some of the ways that the Gospels portray for us that Jesus is different? What are some of the ways? Anybody? Yes, sir. Treated everybody equally, treated everybody the same, okay? And you said meekness, okay? How are you defining meekness there?
We didn't.
Okay, all right. I like that. Meekness, but he's meek. Here's the deal. In both Jewish and Greco-Roman cultures, though, to be meek was not always considered a virtue. Okay? It was sort of like, what was considered a virtue was imposing your will on other people. Okay? So Jesus' meekness, yeah, okay, I'll take that. Something else. Difference. How do they present Jesus as being different? Anyone? Yeah, Keith. Okay. Very good. The way that we do things around here didn't necessarily like, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. In fact, that got Jesus in trouble, didn't it? You know, you said the woman at the well, even the disciples, remember when the disciples come back, they're going, what's he doing talking to this woman? You know, so there's that element. Yeah, okay, good. Something else?
He let the children come to him.
Yeah.
Children were not always like, they were kind of treated as second-class citizens because they were his children. But he wanted them to come over and crawl all over him and talk to him and grow on him.
Yeah, very good. Let the children come to him because, you know, children were, I don't even know if they ranked as high as second-class citizens. I mean,
over here,
yeah.
the idea of meekness,
Uh-huh.
but he was also outspoken.
Ah.
He would tell the truth no matter if it hurt
Yeah.
the people who needed to hear it.
Right. You know, one of my favorite passing moments in the Gospels is the place where the disciples go, Jesus, do you not know that you honked off the Pharisees there? He's like, and your point? Like, you know, it's actually, I always think of that passage when I think there was a lady in Oxford that one time in a very tense meeting, you know, no church meetings are tense though, right? You know, but in a tense meeting, someone was talking about how, you know, something was said or done that really upset them. And this lady never said anything. Talk about meek. I mean, she was just very soft, but she goes, well, sometimes it's the hit dog that yelps, you know? And so I think, you know, when they said, you know, Jesus, do you not know the Pharisees didn't like what you said? Well, sometimes it's the hit dog that yelps, you know, that sort of thing. How else? How else was Jesus different? Miracles, okay? Yeah, you got the miracles. That definitely set him apart. I like the fact that we've kept the focus on how he interacted with people as being something that was different about him. That's great. His interactions with people were different. The way he taught was different. People said, look, this guy acts like he knows what he's talking about. So meek, yes, but truth-telling and assertive without being aggressive. Maybe that's the way to say it. You know, Jesus was certainly that. Yeah, Ty?
He seemed to have a provable relationship with God the Father.
Say that one more time.
He seemed to have a provable relationship with God the Father.
I like that, a provable relationship with God the Father. How would you prove that?
There's a lot of prophets out
Okay.
there saying things that, you know, probably
Okay.
do or may have.
Okay. And it's interesting, you know, several times, like before Jesus does a miracle, you know, he will say, you know, this is, you know, there'll be this interchange between him and the Father. You think particularly before the raising of Lazarus. Remember, Jesus has this little prayer and draws attention to the fact that it is God's power at work in and through him. So, you know, difference is always about comparison to some standard, right? You know, I'm not different, you are, you know, because we're comparing to ourselves. I'm like, well, that's just how I do things. So difference is always about comparison to some standard. And Jesus was being compared to a lot of standards, right? What was one of the main standards he was compared to as a religious teacher in first century? The rabbis, yeah, the way these other folks think. In fact, when they say Jesus teaches with authority, not like one of the rabbis. So there's a comparison going on. Difference is kind of taken by that. I want to go back to and pick up, and you say, well, Greg, if that was your point, why didn't you just tell us all along? Because, you know, it's more fun this way. But I want to pick up on something Ty said. Ty, sit down. No, one thing that Ty, you know, you're about to be recognized here, man. A blood appointment. You know, it takes blood to get you at it. That's right. Okay, I'll be fine. Thank you for the affirmation. You know, what's the point of the blood drive? Anyway, there's this notion here of there's always points. Anyway. his idea about the connection with God, I'm going to say that one of the things that set Jesus apart was his focus. That his focus on, well, can you remember times when Jesus talked about his focus? Are there some situations in which Jesus said, this is my focus. This is what I'm paying attention to.
Especially when they tried to get him to go another route, sometimes the apostles.
Okay, yeah.
As a young man, he said, I need to be about my Father's.
So we get there in Luke 2, early on, Jesus, 12 years old in the temple. We get a little clue there. You know, I need to be, didn't you know I'd be about my Father's business? Minta. Right.
And he prayed before and after so many things, and then he would find the time after the feeding of 4,000, where he assembled all this multitude, and he tells the disciples, you need to come away with me, and we need to go to a place as rest.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good, Minta. He finds time, he creates time where he's going to be with the Father. Yeah, good. Yeah, Luke.
I think the way you tell what someone's really about is what gets them pumped off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like with the money changers, because they were sort of disrespecting God's house by changing
Right.
money. And so,
Yeah, you got some situations where you see what makes Jesus angry, and when Jesus is angry, it's because God or people or God and people are being disrespected. His focus, I would suggest, is listen to just some texts here. John chapter 4. We're going to do 3 quick ones in John, and then we're going to skip over to Mark. But in John chapter 4, verse 34, this is where Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and the disciples have come back, and you sent us into town for some food. Here's some food. You need to eat something. And then he says, verse 32 of John 4, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples said to one another, surely no one has brought him something to eat. And now listen to verse 34. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to complete his work. My food is to do the will of him who sent me. If you just, maybe even the same opening, depending on if it's large print, you'll probably have to turn the page. But John 5, and we get to about verse 30. And again, Jesus in a discussion with some folks about whether or not he has the authority to heal on the Sabbath. Verse 30, in the midst of that discussion, he says, I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek to do not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Okay, what's your focus, Jesus? Stay in John. In fact, again, maybe even the same opening for you, John 6. Again, a large discussion. This is after feeding the 5,000 and the crowd following Jesus. They had wanted to make him king. They're still after him. And he says, I think the reason you're here is because I got you some food. But in the midst of that discussion, verse 38 there in John 6, Jesus says, for I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. So, what's Jesus' focus? Doing the will of the Father. Okay, and I mean I think perhaps above all text here is Jesus praying in the garden, clearly saying, is there a plan B here? Is there another option than what I clearly see the train that is coming down the track at me right now? Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. And so you think about what Jesus' focus is. I think the thing that made Jesus ultimately different was his intense focus on the will of the Father. His intense focus on representing the one who had sent him. Now, I said there are three things I want to introduce you to. The first one, Jesus is just different, and that's how he's different. This class is predicated on the idea that like master, like disciple. So the source of our difference, the source of our uniqueness in this world will be our focus. And hence the title of this class, Christ at the Center of His Church. What will make us different ultimately is going to be our focus on being like Jesus. Our focus on following in His steps. Now, that's the title. Now, one of the ways that Jesus was different was in the matter of what we might call line drawing. Drawing lines. And specifically drawing lines to show who was in or who was out of God's horizon of attention. And that's the second idea. First idea, Jesus was different. Second idea I want us to walk away with is that this notion of line drawing. People love to draw lines. You know, who's in, who's out. Now, I think we know how that works. If nothing else, you learned it in middle school or high school lunchtime, right? You know who the cool kids are because they're not at your table, right? You know, I mean, that sort of thing. And don't try to sit at the cool kids' table, you know. Anybody ever see the old movie Mean Girls? You know, I watched it for 3.5 years teaching high school. You know, it happens. I cannot tell you the number of times. Yes, I can if I thought about it, but I would probably have to use 2 hands. You know, the number of times that I'm if I didn't have lunch duty and I'm looking for some respite during the day, and I'm sitting in my classroom eating lunch, that one time it was a guy, but all the other times it was a girl coming in and saying, "No one will let me sit with them today." You know, and I really just don't want to. I don't want to, you know, go around. So it happens. We know the line drawings. We know who's in, who's out. You know, and if that's so long ago that you don't remember, talk to your kids or grandkids. We're just good at that. People love to draw lines. Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17, there is this incident, this moment. Jesus went out again beside the sea. Excuse me. The whole crowd, it says, gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And now, interesting, just quick transition here. Mark's great about quick transitions. So we've just been introduced to Levi, son of Alphaeus. We've just been introduced to the fact that he is following Jesus. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the many of what who followed him? Tax collectors and sinners. Very nice. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" You know, why is he not with the cool kids? By the way, in their definition, who are the cool kids? Them, exactly. When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." A couple things here, but first, just a really fun fact to think about. The way Mark sets this up, it would appear that Levi, the tax collector, where is Jesus when he sees him? But where is Jesus when he sees, where is Levi's booth by implication? By the sea. Exactly. What in the name of all that makes good sense is a tax collector having his little booth set up by the seashore? Fishermen. Yes, because one of the things that the Romans loved to tax was, okay, Peter, let me see what your haul was today. Okay, well, I know you got to go to market and sell that, but here's what you owe me when you get back. Okay, so that's why he's there. So he would have been very, very popular, you know. All the fishermen love him, you know. And yet Jesus calls him, and what were some of Jesus' other disciples? Fishermen. Oh, Jesus, you're always poking the bear, you know. Because here he calls this guy, you know, who's in the tax booth by the seashore, hassling these fishermen. He's got fishermen already following him, and he picks up this tax collector. Are you stinking kidding me, Jesus? But anyway, it's a great moment. But more so, why are the scribes of the Pharisees, why are they upset with Jesus? Doesn't follow the status quo. He's associating with sinners. Sinners. People who are on which side of the line? The other side, you know. But Jesus is very different. He is the exact opposite, in fact, to these contemporary religious leaders, to the religious gatekeepers who want to be very clear about who's in and who's out, who is an object of God's favor and who is not. And Jesus, maybe you don't know who these people are, but we do, of course, because we are the gatekeepers, we are the line drawers. We know who's in, who's out, and those people are out. And there you are, hanging out with them, Jesus. And of course, you know, you got to love his response. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Yeah, I know. I'm with the folks who are on the wrong side of the line. We might also read Matthew 23, where Jesus talks about the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. We might also read Matthew 23 in light of this reality that there are folks out there, the religious gatekeepers, the religious line drawers, and particularly the statement at the beginning of verse 13 of Matthew 23, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. You don't just draw lines, you build walls. You're keeping people out by the way you're approaching things. So, okay, we've got two of the 3 points that I want us to leave with today. We've got Jesus was different, okay? Now, if we're talking about Christ at the center of his church, we got to talk about, you know, the fact that Jesus was different. Then secondly, people. And as I look around the room, I'm thinking most of us are, you know, people, you know. People love to draw lines, okay? Love to draw lines. So those are 2 of the 3 points. Here's the third. And get ready, it's a math lesson. Set theory, to be precise. And like me, you told your high school math teachers you'd never use any of this stinking stuff. But look, here we are today, a little bit of set theory. We've got such a thing as a bounded set. A bounded set has a clear, static boundary. You've got a hard line there. And you've got people who are inside and people who are outside. And everybody knows who is inside and who's outside. There's a definite set of criteria for who can be in and who is out. Because if you don't meet that set of criteria, then you're not in. Pretty clear, right? And we love clarity. Not only do we love to draw lines, we love clarity. In fact, maybe we draw lines because we love clarity. And so here's this situation. You're in or you're out. And as far as some of Jesus' contemporaries were concerned, that was how the people of God were defined. A very clear set of criteria. And you're either in or you're out. Now, What were some of the boundary markers that were being pointed to, let's say by Jewish folks, Jewish religious leaders that were contemporaries of Jesus? What were some of the boundary markers they would have pointed to that tell you whether you're in or you're out? Oh, their Jewishness? Yeah. Someone said something over here.
So Paul, when he told who he was, he used those boundaries.
Yes.
I was a Jew of Judah, a Pharisee. I was taught by Gamaliel. I was
Yep.
all of these things.
Yep.
So there's a list that each person would have.
Yep. So everybody has their own list to some extent. But for most folks, someone said it back here. Circumcision. Yep. Oh, I heard it again. No one said anything. Circumcision was one. You're either in or you're out. You're exactly right. Paul says, I used to think in these terms, boundary terms, that this was where you drew the line. Anyone else got something else? What's that? Yeah, they would be on the outside, because hey, we can point to a verse, actually several verses, that says they're out. Okay? So, those folks are on the out. We know who's on the in. What's that? You kind of can get into that too, because guess what? Maybe my boundaries are a little bit, I'm thinking you're a little more liberal than I am, Keith. You just want people to have washed their right hand. I want people to have washed both hands.
What I was thinking, the rabbis,
Other Keith. Right.
traditions that weren't necessarily the law, they wanted
Yeah.
Jesus to follow whatever that was, the Mishnah. All that.
Because we love to draw lines, right? Refer back to point number 2,
Jesus broke the line when he talked to the rich young ruler, and he said, I've kept all of these since I was a child.
I'm on the right side. I'm on the right side of all of those markers. So you got these markers. You got this set of criteria as to who's in and who's out. Okay? Now, back to set theory, back to math, back to something that makes sense, not this Bible stuff. All right, now, anyway. You've got what could be called a fuzzy set, which has a much less clear boundary. That's where you got the little, thing going around there and kind of dissipating and, oh, there it goes. Oh, there it goes. Anyway, it's a much less clear boundary. The set of criteria are a little vaguer, perhaps even negotiable. It could change from time to time. And the theologian Mark Baker, following the missionary and anthropologist Paul Hibert, has what I think is a helpful analogy here when thinking about the difference between a bounded set, a firm. This is this side of the line, that's that side of the line, versus this sort of fuzzy kind of idea, this fuzzy set. Think of your kids or grandkids playing a sport. For our purposes, let's say soccer, And I'm not talking the U5s where it's just clumps of kids, following a ball, kind of thing. But let's say your child gets a little, up there, let's say U11s, under 11s. If they're on a school team or on a travel team, you have to pay a fee, okay? You have to make sure you've got certain equipment. There's this ritual at the beginning of each game where you find out if everybody's got their shin guards on and everybody's shoes are tied and everybody's got the right kind of cleats for the field you're playing on and yada, yada, yada. Got to be in they have to have a uniform that's consistent with others on the team. They have to be at practices. When our youngest son was on a U15 team, there was just some kid that, I'm a gamer. I don't show up to practices. What eventually happened to him? He wasn't on the team after a while, there are things that are expected, and it's always going to be according to the league rules or the association rules, or if it's a school team and you're here in Tennessee, according to the rules of the TSSAA. That's where there are these, this, even team size is set and ordained, depending on what level you're at. And you're either on the team or you're not. You either meet this set of criteria or you don't. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's our one hand. Okay. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, at the end of the day, is there not going to be an in or an out?
Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah,
Out at the end of the day.
yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay.
I'm just,
Yeah, we're getting there. So that's one option. Here's another option that Baker and Hybert come up with. And I think immediately when I saw their example, I thought of some kids I saw on a mission trip to southern Honduras that I was on a number of years ago. Or the very mountainous area, but the only flat area there, day after day there'd be a pickup game of football, pickup game of soccer. And it just was amazing. All of the available kids, some days more than others, could be guys, could be girls, could be combination. It depended on who was free, obviously. It was a coffee plantation area, so, depended on what else was going on the different coffee farms. Some days it was 7v7, some days it was 4v4, some days there was a waiting line, and playing 11v11. Sometimes it would be 4v4 till other people showed up, and then we incorporate them in, but of course got to be an even number, all that sort of stuff. It was just whoever showed up. The ball they played with, whatever ball someone brings with them, that sort of thing. So riddle me this, if that's our second example. First example is you're on an organized team of some sort. Second, you're on, just these pickup games. Which one of those is a bounded set? Which one is a fuzzy set? First one's bounded. Second one's kind of fuzzy. But what do they both have in common? There are some rules. That's right. I mean, even on that pickup game, it was not suddenly going to become a swimming meet. First of all, not enough water, even when it rained. But it was still going to be a soccer game. There were certain basic ideas and how they needed to deal with them going on. But still, they're on one continuum of that somewhere on there of where are you on that boundary? What is the boundary? Okay? And what are the rules we're going to go? Well, you could probably predict this. You knew there would be. There's a third option. Okay? It's not an either or between having a set boundary and a fuzzy set. And I would suggest that there is a completely different way of looking at it. A centered set, because that's a completely different paradigm. It's not about the boundary, but about direction and relationship to what is in the center. Now, if you notice some of those figures, obviously a couple of them are clearly moving, but you see the one guy over here, I think, does this do a laser thing? I don't know. Nope, apparently not. But you see the one guy over here to the right of the cross, he's walking away. He's closer than some of the folks, though, who are walking towards. Okay? You got some people by the directional arrows. There's some people who are relatively close, but their direction is moving away. You got some people who are far away, but their direction is moving toward. The boundary in this case is not something that you draw. The boundary, to the extent that there is one, and there is one, to get to your point, is about, are you moving toward what is at the center? Because in a sense, you can be close to, but moving away. How would you describe, just in terms of thinking about the people of God, how would you describe those folks who, in the name of God, oppose Jesus at every opportunity? You know, by self-definition and truly, certainly compared to the broader number of people in the world, were they closer to God? But which direction were they moving? You know? And then there are some of these folks like, let's say, this tax collector Levi and his buddies, sinners and tax collectors, but they're actually kind of moving toward Jesus. They're actually at least giving him a listen. With that thought in mind, let's reread Mark 2:13 through 17. You know, thinking in terms of, you know, this geometry of bounded set and fuzzy set and centered set. And just listen to it again. Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I've come to call not the righteous, but sinners." So who's in? Who's out in that story? You know, it all of a sudden, it becomes more about who's moving toward Jesus, who's moving away from Jesus. Who is trying to figure out how do I become closer to what Jesus is doing and what he's about, and who is like, I'm about rejecting Jesus. So, yeah, Dave?
What about who realizes they have it deep?
Okay.
Because the sick person knows they
I need a doctor.
But a person who thinks they're well, I have no need of that. And so for Pharisees, they would look at Jesus and say, I have no need of that.
Yeah. I'm well, right. Yeah. And I think that is part of what's going on. Whereas, flip that, the sinners and the tax collectors would be those who say, something's got to give, you know. And maybe just being, you know, do they have it all figured out at this point? But they're moving they're moving toward the answer. Yeah, Luke.
This part I really get to think is that for the first few thousand years, when God's promise was with the Jewish people were moving in the right direction, and then Jesus comes, and then it becomes the wrong direction. Like, no longer are the Jewish people right just because they're Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, up until when Jesus comes, the Jewish people were the right people, and now that Jesus has come, they seem to be the ones on the wrong side of the line.
I would say I'd push back a little bit on that characterization of it in that it's not that they were just right for being right, because that was never the case, because otherwise we can just take the prophets right out of the Old Testament, because, you know, if they were right and there was no way they could be wrong, then, you know, why is it that God's constantly coming back and you have this ongoing conversation, you know, about what does it mean for them to be people who belong to God? And they fall woefully short of that. So I don't know that it was just Jesus shows up and all of a sudden now everything they thought was wrong. Because, you know, I mean, even Jesus says, look, I'm not here to overthrow Torah. What I'm here to do, and I think he does that pretty skillfully there in the Sermon on the Mount when he goes, you've heard that it was said, but I tell you, is that, look, you guys have seen, and we'll get into this moving, you guys have presented doing God's will as a matter of not stepping over certain lines, when what God was doing all the time was pointing you in a direction to move. And so I'd push back a little on the, hey, they had it all right, and then Jesus shows up and tells them they got it wrong. No, I think the point was they did not have it right on some level. But I see what you're saying. Again, God's not abandoning, Romans 9 through 11, God's not abandoning his covenant people, but his covenant people was always about being his representatives to the whole world and expanding his message in the whole world. And they'd gotten kind of back inside their boundaries and said, who cares about all those folks? Manuel?
Some of those folks may think they are close enough to the cross to where they can stop moving. My thinking is, if we ever stop making that movement and think we're already there, we will eventually drift away, which is probably what the problem was with the Jews. They felt they were already children of God and stopped actively seeking God. Eventually they started drifting. So we cannot be at a point where we feel we're close enough to the cross, we don't have to do anything. We have to continue making that effort to move towards the cross.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, because I think that is, and that ties in with, what Luke was bringing up. It wasn't that Jesus says, everything God said to you before, throw that out. Doesn't say that at all. He's saying, you guys didn't see that as pointing you in a direction to keep moving. You saw, hey, we're on the right side of the line, we can stop now, So it's, and what's weird about, we'll get to that later on. I just want to do a couple of things just to give you kind of previews, because I think, Chuck's question is spot on. Wait, are you saying it's just spiritual anarchy? Oh, absolutely not. Because if you start thinking about, just to let me see if I can back this up. Everything now is focused on, are we moving closer to the ideal? Individually and as a church. What's at the center for us? What is our focus? So, a couple of previews of coming attractions. We're going to be talking about in this class, what's our center? And our, as in not some sort of a vague, nebulous, everybody and their brother kind of thing. You're talking about OC. What's our focus? Our focus for this church. What orients us? Because something's going to orient us on our journey. So what is it that orients us? And then secondly, just in time. We're going to be working through, kind of as a basis for this, we're going to be kind of camping out in Paul's letter to the Galatians and watch how he addresses some of the issues there by putting Jesus at the center, by making Christ the focal point for these ancient brothers and sisters. And I think there's some stuff that's going to be helpful to us in thinking in those terms. Yes, sir.
Go back to that before the end, that slide that shows people walking forward and toward the back. Could there be a fourth idea that is, there's people moving toward the cross, people going away, but there's still a circle around the cross that people could be in, walking away, coming closer, those that are outside coming closer and walking away?
Here's what I would say, and we'll get into this more, is the circle sounds like a very defined zone. And I'm thinking if like with these folks, the ones that are moving towards the cross, that it's not going to be just a perfect circle. For instance, if you're like a friend of mine, just to give an example, if you're like a friend of mine who came out of modern, not ancient, modern paganism, completely godless, lived a horrible life, he became a Christian and then started having to make all kinds of changes that would move him closer. So was he farther away than some folks who are like some of us lifers who knew all the right rules to follow and knew all the right things to do and did those things? Yeah, but even though from maybe like a moral standpoint, he was still far out there, but he was moving,
I'm thinking about see that character on the far right-hand side,
Mhm.
far away from the cross coming. Could be the Apostle Paul after he saw Jesus.
Mhm.
He's not with Jesus yet,
Mhm.
but he is coming as he was blind and fasting in that room for
Sure.
3 days. He was coming, but he still had to have Ananias come and teaching and baptizing
Sure.
with forgiveness of sins. So he was coming toward the cross. But that didn't mean he was saved yet.
His life has been completely oriented into, in the direction of Jesus.
Yes, it was.
And, please do not, since we're apparently already going there, was going to wait till let that come up in Galatians. Just say, look, I'm, not ever going to say baptism is not important. But I am also never going to say, to me, it was always just a false thing about, you're on your way to be baptized and you're killed in a car wreck. Oh, it's a shame you'll go to hell. I personally do not see God operating that way. And I'm really glad it's up to God and not me. And I don't know why we ever thought it was up to us to make that decision. But ultimately, what we're responsible for, wherever we are we moving closer to the ideal? We're moving closer to the cross, closer to Christ.
But there are cores in Christianity.
Absolutely. And I think Paul in Galatians is going to help us navigate that, because he had to help them navigate that. Yeah, exactly. But I'm thinking we're making a mistake if we turn those core things, if we turn those into opportunities to draw lines and not keep pointing people to Jesus. So.
I like what Clarence McDowell has said. I don't know who God's going to save or not, but I know what God tells us as Christians.
I agree completely. Yeah, I agree completely. Completely. All right, next week we'll come back at it.